There's an old saying, you never really know what happens behind closed doors. In a quiet suburb in Clemens, North Carolina, one house on Nob Hill Drive made that phrase a terrifying reality. It was a place of decay, a vortex of filth and chaos that neighbors had been whispering about for years. Inside, a man who had traded his birth name for an ancient demon's was building his personal hell. He told people he was a god who worshipped Satan, that he could control the weather, and bragged to anyone who would listen that he had killed and even eaten people. But for years, everyone just wrote these off as the ravings of a disturbed but harmless outcast. The town treated him like a local sideshow, a scary story, until the day investigators finally showed up with shovels. He claimed to sacrifice animals, he bragged about murders, but for years, nobody took him seriously. How did his grotesque fantasy become a nightmarish reality? And what dark secrets were finally unearthed from shallow graves on his property? This is the deeply disturbing case of Pazuzu Algarad. But this story doesn't start with a demon. It starts with a boy named John Alexander Lawson, and his early life was marked by instability. There's conflicting information about where he was born. Some say San Francisco, others North Carolina. What's clear is that after his parents split, he moved with his mother, Cynthia, to her hometown in Forsyth County, North Carolina. For a little while, they looked like a normal family. Cynthia remarried, they settled into that house on Nob Hill Drive, and if you look at photos from this time, you see a smiling kid with blonde hair, wearing a Cub Scout uniform or a local football jersey. But underneath this suburban picture, something was going wrong. It was clear pretty early on that John was struggling with his mental health. His mother tried to get him help, but financial issues made consistent psychiatric care impossible. His mental state started to decline, and fast. Classmates from his high school remember him as a withdrawn kid who was hardly ever there. He got the nickname Diablo, and by his freshman year, he had pretty much stopped going to school before dropping out completely. The home itself wasn't a great situation. His mother and stepfather didn't get along, and John became a recluse inside his own house. He started drinking heavily at just 13 years old, which spiraled into alcoholism and drug abuse. People who knew him back then described him as a little off-kilter and emotional, and they noted early signs of cruelty to animals. He was developing a deep resentment for the world, a bitterness that would harden into a monstrous new identity. The boy named John Lawson was disappearing, and a new persona, forged in mental illness, substance abuse, and a growing obsession with the occult, was about to take his place. In 2002, John Lawson makes a decision, a radical one. He decides to kill his old identity. He goes to the courthouse and legally changes his name to Pazuzu Ila Algarad. The name itself is a signal. Pazuzu, the Mesopotamian demon made famous by the movie The Exorcist, the opening act of a long, terrifying performance. And this transformation wasn't just in name, it was a total reinvention, physical and psychological. He starts covering his face in a chaotic mess of tattoos, swastikas, and demonic symbols that created an inhuman mask. He took a file to his own teeth, sharpening them into points. He stopped bathing, claiming hygiene stripped the body of its defenses. He hadn't brushed his teeth in years. He would tell these wild stories, sometimes claiming he was from Iraq, or that his father was a satanic high priest. He was building a new personal mythology to erase his ordinary past. He wanted to be a monster, and he was doing everything in his power to look and act like one. His religion was a strange cocktail of his own design, mixing bits of Luciferianism. He told psychiatrists he followed a Sumerian religion that needed regular sacrifices and talked about performing rituals during the black moon. He began to boast openly about his depraved acts. He told people he drank the blood of birds and sacrificed rabbits, claiming he got a high from eating their still-beating hearts. The performance was becoming impossible to separate from the man. His mother, Cynthia, who was still living with him, would later say he didn't actually worship the devil, but that detail was lost on everyone else. He had successfully turned himself into the town boogeyman, and the community watched, disturbed, but mostly from a distance. They saw him as a caricature of evil. No one could see the genuine, murderous violence that was festering just underneath. And his house, the house at 2749 Nob Hill Drive, became a physical manifestation of his new identity. What was once a standard suburban home devolved into a den of unimaginable squalor, a place that would later be called the House of Horrors. It became a magnet for other outcasts, runaways, and misfits. Algarad offered them a place with no rules, a sanctuary sanctuary where they could indulge their darkest impulses. The conditions on the ground were apocalyptic. Walls were spray-painted with pentagrams and swastikas. Garbage was piled knee-high, sometimes waist-high, in every single room. Broken glass was everywhere. The air was thick with flies, and the stench of decay, animal feces, and human waste was overpowering. A housing inspector who went into the home in 2014 declared it unfit for human habitation almost immediately. His report documented decayed animal parts, cages with animal carcasses, and dried blood on the walls. A woman who stayed there for a month in 2009 gave a chilling account of daily life inside. She described seeing feces piled in corners, saying Algarad would just urinate and defecate wherever he wanted. She said self-harm, drinking bird blood, rabbit sacrifices, rampant drug use, and orgies were all normal activities. But despite this repulsive environment, or maybe because of it, Algarad had this twisted charisma that drew people in, especially women. He had multiple fiancées. Two of them became his most loyal disciples, Amber Birch and Crystal Matlock. Birch was more than a follower. She was his partner and the mother of his child. She became deeply enmeshed in his world, a willing participant in his rituals, and ultimately, his crimes. Matlock was another close associate, drawn into the chaos and bound by a mix of fear and loyalty. And Algarad's mother, Cynthia, was also living in the house through all of this, a seemingly terrified spectator to her son's descent. She had been a victim of his violence before. Court records show Algarad was convicted of assaulting her in 2011 after choking her, though she declined to press charges out of fear. Amber Birch was also convicted of assaulting her. This house on Nob Hill Drive was no longer a home. It had become a miniature cult compound, ruled by a man who had remade himself in the image of a demon. For years, Pazuzu Algarad's claims of murder were just seen as part of his terrifying act. He'd openly bragged to people that he killed and ate 2 individuals, then burned their bodies in a fire pit before burying them. These rumors swirled around Clemens, but they were so cartoonishly evil that almost no one believed they could be true. But inside the house on Nob Hill Drive, this horrifying fiction had become a brutal reality. The first victim was 37-year-old Joshua Frederick Wetzler. In July of 2009, Algarad shot and killed him inside the house. According to a search warrant, Algarad's mother, Cynthia, was home and heard the gunshots. His fiancée, Amber Birch, wasn't there for the murder, but he called her a few days later to help him bury the body in the backyard. Crystal Matlock, his other follower, also helped. Just 3 months later, in October 2009, the roles were reversed. This time, Amber Birch took the lead. She brought 36-year-old Tommy Dean Welch back to the house. Later that night, as Welch sat on the couch next to an intoxicated Algarad, Birch shot Welch in the head with a .22 caliber rifle. Algarad then helped her drag the body outside and bury it in another shallow grave. These weren't his only brushes with homicide. In 2010, he was connected to the shooting death of another man, 30-year-old Joseph Emmerich Chandler. Algarad was convicted as an accessory after the fact, admitting he had lied to police and let the main suspect stay at his house. But despite the conviction, he just got probation, no prison time. The system had him and let him go, completely unaware that he was already a multiple murderer. For 5 long years, Joshua Wetzler and Tommy Dean Welch were just missing persons. Their families had no answers, while the man responsible for their deaths continued his satanic performance in his house of horrors, hiding his crimes in plain sight. The truth was just a few feet underground. The whispers finally came to a head on October 5, 2014. Acting on a tip, sheriff's deputies arrived at 2749 Nob Hill Drive with a search warrant, and what they found confirmed the community's worst fears. There in the backyard, buried in shallow graves, were the skeletal remains of 2 people. The remains were quickly identified as Joshua Wetzler and Tommy Dean Welch, both missing since 2009. The cause of death for both men was a gunshot wound. Pazuzu Algarad and Amber Birch were arrested and charged with murder. Crystal Matlock was also taken into custody, charged as an accessory for helping to bury one of the bodies. The investigation revealed that authorities had missed earlier chances. A search warrant affidavit showed that Algarad's own mother had gone to the sheriff's office in 2011 to report a murder at the house. But for reasons that are still not clear, a search was not conducted. the case went cold. For 3 more years, the bodies stayed buried, while Algarad continued his act. With the house now a confirmed crime scene, county inspectors went in and immediately declared it toxic and unsafe. Facing an estimated $78,000 in repair costs, the property was foreclosed on. In April 2015, a demolition crew arrived. Neighbors gathered on the street, some setting up lawn chairs, and cheered as the House of Horrors was finally torn down, erasing the physical scar from their community. But the central figure of the case would never go to trial. On the morning of October 28, 2015, just a day before a court appearance, Pazuzu Algarad was found dead in his prison cell. He had bled to death from a deep wound to his arm, an apparent. He was 36 years old. His accomplices, however, were held accountable. In March 2017, Amber Birch pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and received a sentence of 30 to 39 years in prison. A few months later, Crystal Matlock, who claimed she was afraid of Algarad, was convicted for helping hide the bodies. She was sentenced to 3 to 4 years and was released with credit for time served. The demolition of the house and the death of Algarad brought some closure, but the case left a permanent stain on the town.